The fluorescent light above your desk flickers. It's done that for 3 years. You've stopped noticing it, the same way you've stopped noticing the smell of the break room microwave, or the sound of your manager's voice when he says your name like it's a complaint. It's 11:47 p.m. You're not supposed to be here. But the spreadsheet in front of you isn't for work. It's yours. 4 tabs. 6 years of numbers. A account balance that reads $4,212. $4,212. That's what's left after rent, after the car payment on a Civic with 140,000 miles, after the ramen you ate for dinner because payday is Friday and today is Tuesday. You open a second tab. A trading app. The account is small. Almost embarrassingly small. But tonight, for the first time in 6 years of nights just like this one, the numbers do something they've never done before. They move the way you said they would. Not by $10. Not by $50. By $11,406 in 14 minutes. You don't move. You don't breathe. You just stare at a number that is larger than your entire savings account, larger than your last 4 paychecks combined, and you think one word. Finally. You have no idea yet that this moment, this small, fluorescent-lit, ramen-smelling moment, is the last ordinary night of your life. Rank 1, the gambler. At first, you tell yourself it's just a hobby. A distraction. Something to do instead of scrolling your phone at 2 a.m., hating your life a little less loudly. You start small, $500 you can afford to lose, sitting in a brokerage app that took you 4 minutes to open. You watch charts the way other people watch television. Green candles. Red candles. A rhythm that starts to feel like a language only you understand. You lose money. A lot of it, actually. You blow through that first 500 in 11 days, chasing a stock some stranger on a forum swore was about to run. It didn't run. It collapsed, and so did your stomach when you saw the number. You tell no one. Not your roommate. Not your mother, who still asks if you're doing okay financially every Sunday call, in that voice that means she already knows the answer is no. You put in another 500. This time, you read. You study. Risk management. Position sizing. The difference between a swing trade and a scalp. You stop treating it like a slot machine and start treating it like a discipline, because somewhere in those 11 days of losses, something clicked. You weren't gambling. You were bleeding tuition. Rank 2, the student. Your evenings disappear into candlestick patterns and earnings calendars. You wake up at 5:45 a.m., before your actual job, just to watch the pre-market movers. You start keeping a trading journal, logging every entry, every exit, every mistake, in a notebook you hide under your mattress like it's contraband. Because in a way, it is. It's evidence of a second life. Your friends invite you out on a Friday night. You say you're tired. The truth is you're up until 1 a.m. backtesting a strategy on 5 years of historical data, trying to find an edge, some repeatable pattern the market hasn't priced away yet. You blow up 2 more small accounts. Each time, it costs less, because each time, you've learned something the last account taught you in blood. Stop losses aren't optional. Revenge trading after a loss is how accounts die. The market doesn't care how badly you need the money. In fact, it seems to punish you specifically for needing it. 6 months in, something changes. You're not winning big. But you're not losing anymore, either. Small green days. Small red days. A slow, boring, unglamorous curve, up and to the right. You don't tell anyone this either. Because I broke even for a month, isn't a story you know how to tell without sounding insane. Rank 3, the double life. By month 9, the numbers stop being small. You quietly max out a Roth IRA, the legal, boring, unglamorous account nobody brags about, the one that will matter more in 20 years than anything else you own. You open a second, taxable brokerage account for the more aggressive trades, because you've learned, the hard way, to never mix the accounts you can afford to lose with the ones you can't. You start reading about trader tax status, the IRS distinction between an investor and someone who trades as a business, which changes how your gains are taxed and what you're allowed to deduct. You learn about mark-to-market election, a technical filing that changes how your losses are treated, and you learn it not because you're rich, but because you're terrified of doing this wrong and losing it all to a mistake you didn't know you were making. You still drive the Civic. You still eat the same groceries. You tell your coworkers you're doing okay when they ask, in the same flat tone you always have. Nothing about your outside life has changed. But your inside life has split into 2 people. There's the version of you that clocks in, says have a good weekend to people who have no idea, and drives home in a car worth less than what you made in that one trade 11 months ago. And there's the version of you that, at midnight, is reading SEC filings and 10Ks like they're bedtime stories, building spreadsheets that model 6 different tax scenarios, quietly becoming someone your own mother wouldn't recognize. You start lying. Not big lies. Small ones. I'm just doing some investing. It's not that much. I don't want to jinx it. Every one of them is technically true and completely dishonest. Rank 4, the professional. You quit your job on a Tuesday. You tell your boss it's for a new opportunity. You tell your mother it's a startup thing. You tell yourself it's the truth, because trading a 5-figure account full-time is, in fact, a job, just one with no salary, no health insurance, and no guarantee you'll still have an income in 6 months. This is where the isolation gets real. You can't explain your schedule to anyone. You're working from 6:30 a.m. to noon, then dead silent for the rest of the day. Friends assume you're unemployed. Family let them assume it, because the alternative, explaining that you made more last Tuesday than your old job paid in a month, and lost almost as much the Thursday after, sounds either like bragging or like lying. You set up an LLC to formalize the business, on the advice of an accountant who specializes in trader taxation, not to hide anything, but because it lets you deduct a home office, a portion of your data subscriptions, the extra monitor you bought to watch 4 charts at once. You start separating trading capital from living capital with the same discipline a surgeon uses to separate sterile from non-sterile, because you've watched other traders blur that line and lose everything, including the money that was supposed to pay rent. You eat the same food. Drive the same car. Nobody around you has any idea what your account actually says, and you've started to prefer it that way. The less anyone knows, the less you have to explain when it goes wrong, and some days, it still goes very, very wrong. The crisis. It's a Sunday dinner. Your sister, sharper than she gets credit for, always has been, is asking casual questions that don't feel casual anymore. How do you even afford your apartment right now? You say something vague about savings. She doesn't buy it. You can see it in the half-second pause before her next question. You've been really weird about money lately. Are you into something you shouldn't be? Your heart does something ugly. Because the honest answer, I make and lose more money in a single day than you make in a month, and I've told no one, and I don't know how to say that out loud without sounding like either a liar or someone who's about to lose it all, is not an answer you know how to give at a dinner table. You laugh it off. You change the subject. You watch her decide, visibly, not to push further, and you feel something you didn't expect to feel in that moment of relief. Shame. Because the people who love you most are the people you've hidden the most from. Not out of malice. Out of fear. Fear that they'll worry. Fear that they'll ask for help you can't guarantee. Fear that if you say it out loud, and it falls apart, you'll have to explain that failure to every single person who ever asked how you were really doing. The ethical dilemma. There's someone else now. Someone who's starting to matter. They ask you, gently, one night, why you never talk about money. Why you flinch when they bring up the future, a house, a wedding, kids, the ordinary architecture of a shared life. You have a choice in this moment. The same choice you've had for 2 years, dressed up in a different outfit each time. Tell the truth, the whole, complicated, terrifying truth, including the 6-figure months and the near-zero months, including the fact that your income has no floor and no ceiling, including the fact that you have spent 2 years lying by omission to protect people from a life you weren't sure you could sustain. Or protect them the way you've protected everyone else. Keep the peace. Keep the story simple. Let them believe in the version of you that's easier to explain. You choose honesty. Mostly. You tell them enough to be true, not enough to be safe. You watch their face while you talk, waiting for the moment they decide you're either impressive or insane. They don't decide either. They just ask one more question, quieter than the rest. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You don't have a good answer. You've been so busy protecting people from the risk that you never stopped to ask whether the secrecy itself was the thing hurting them. Rank 5, the veteran. Years pass. The account that started at $4,212 no longer resembles that number in any way. You've built structure around it, a trust for long-term holdings, a diversified allocation that would look, to any outside observer, almost boringly conservative. The wild years are still part of you, but they're not the whole of you anymore. You still remember the fluorescent light. The ramen. The $11,406 that changed everything in 14 minutes. You still trade. But it doesn't feel like survival anymore. It feels like a craft you spent a decade learning to respect. You tell the story now, sometimes, to people who ask how you got here. You leave out the part where you almost lost it all 4 separate times. You leave out the part where you lied to your sister at a dinner table. You leave out the nights you sat alone with a number on a screen and no one to call, because no one knew there was anything to call about. Some parts of that double life, you never fully leave behind. You built a life most people will never see the real shape of. Not because you wanted to deceive anyone, but because the truth was too big, too uncertain, too easy to misunderstand, to hand to people who loved you and worried anyway. So here's the question. If the version of your life that finally worked required you to become someone unrecognizable to the people who know you best, quietly, gradually, one small omission at a time, would you still call it winning? Tell me in the comments, would you have told them sooner?